Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we delve into one of the most profoundly challenging questions facing modern societies. Should the death penalty be abolished? This is not merely a legal debate. It touches upon our deepest ethical convictions, our understanding of justice, and the very nature of state power. The complexities are immense, involving considerations of morality, deterrence, retribution, and the ever-present risk of irreversible error. Joining us to navigate this contentious terrain are two highly distinguished legal minds. Arguing passionately for abolition is Mr. Samuel Adebayo, a renowned human rights lawyer. And presenting the case for retaining capital punishment is Ms. Isabella Rossi, a former prosecutor with extensive experience in complex criminal cases. Our format will begin with opening statements, followed by rebuttals, a moderated discussion, and concluding remarks from each participant. Let's begin with Mr. Adebayo's opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. The central tenet of my argument is straightforward, yet fundamental. The state-sanctioned killing of a human being is inherently immoral and constitutes a violation of the most basic human right, the right to life. This right is inalienable, irrespective of the horrific nature of the crime committed. When the state, which should uphold the highest ethical standards, resorts to killing, it lowers itself to the level of the criminals it condemns. Furthermore, we must confront the terrifying reality of judicial fallibility. Our justice systems, despite best efforts, are designed and operated by humans, and humans make mistakes. Evidence emerges, witnesses recant, new technologies shed light on old cases. An execution, however, is utterly irreversible. The execution of even one innocent person is a catastrophic failure of justice that society cannot tolerate. Proponents often claim the death penalty acts as a unique deterrent to violent crime. Yet, decades of criminological research overwhelmingly contradict this assertion. There is simply no credible empirical evidence demonstrating that capital punishment deters homicide more effectively than the alternative of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Many jurisdictions without the death penalty exhibit lower or comparable homicide rates to those that retain it. We cannot justify state killing based on a speculative deterrent effect that lacks scientific validation. Beyond its questionable efficacy, the application of the death penalty is plagued by systemic inequities. Study after study reveals disturbing patterns of bias based on race, socioeconomic status, and geography. Defendants from minority backgrounds, those who cannot afford adequate legal representation, and those prosecuted in certain jurisdictions are disproportionately sentenced to death. This transforms the ultimate penalty into a reflection of societal prejudices rather than impartial justice. Finally, consider the global context. The vast majority of democratic nations, our peers on the international stage, have abolished the death penalty in law or practice. Its retention places us in the company of nations often criticized for their human rights records. This international trend reflects an evolving standard of decency, a recognition that state killing is incompatible with modern human rights principles. Therefore, based on moral imperatives, the unacceptable risk of error, the lack of proven deterrence, and its discriminatory application, I urge the complete abolition of the death penalty.
Dr. Reed, Mr. Adebayo, thank you. While I respect Mr. Adebayo's principled stance, I must fundamentally disagree. The death penalty, when reserved for the most heinous and aggravated crimes, is not only constitutionally permissible, but also a necessary instrument of justice. This is not about vengeance, which is an emotional response. It is about retribution, a core principle of justice demanding that punishment be proportionate to the severity of the crime. Certain acts, premeditated mass murder, the torture and killing of a child, terrorism resulting in mass casualties, are so profoundly evil, so destructive to the fabric of society, that they demand the ultimate penalty. To impose a lesser sentence would be to devalue the lives of the innocent victims and signal societal indifference to unspeakable cruelty. It is a statement that some actions forfeit the perpetrator's right to continue living among us. we must also consider the perspective of the victims and their grieving families, while acknowledging that not all victims' families support capital punishment. For many, it represents the only form of justice commensurate with their unimaginable loss and suffering. Their voices deserve to be heard in this debate. Justice must encompass their need for closure and societal condemnation of the act that shattered their lives. Regarding deterrence, while the statistical evidence remains debated among academics, common sense suggests that the fear of execution, the ultimate finality, holds a potential deterrent effect for at least some individuals contemplating capital crimes. More significantly, however, is the undeniable aspect of permanent incapacitation. Execution guarantees that a convicted murderer, particularly one deemed incorrigible or presenting an ongoing threat even within prison, can never harm again. Life imprisonment, while severe, carries the possibility, however remote, of escape, parole in jurisdictions that allow it, or violence against prison staff and other inmates. Mr. Adebayo raises the crucial issue of potential error. However, our modern legal system incorporates exhaustive safeguards specifically for capital cases. These include multiple levels of judicial review, automatic appeals, rigorous scrutiny of evidence, access to post-conviction DNA testing, and gubernatorial clemency powers. While no system is perfect, these measures are meticulously designed to minimize the risk of wrongful execution to an exceptionally low level. Therefore, I argue for the retention of the death penalty as a just punishment for the worst offenders, a necessary measure for societal protection through incapacitation, a potential deterrent, and a means of affirming the supreme value we place on innocent human life. Mr. Adebayo frames abolition as a moral imperative, but I contend the state also has a profound moral duty to protect its citizens and enforce justice. Failing to impose a proportionate penalty for the most egregious crimes could be seen as a moral failing in itself. He rightly highlights the tragedy of potential error. However, the extensive legal safeguards I mentioned are not trivial. They represent decades of procedural refinement aimed squarely at preventing such outcomes. We must weigh this minimized, though admittedly non-zero, risk against the certainty of the guilt established in the vast majority of capital cases after exhaustive review, and the certainty that the executed individual will never kill again. Regarding deterrence, the academic debate often hinges on complex statistical modeling with inherent limitations. Absence of definitive proof is not proof of absence. The potential for deterrence, however difficult to quantify, cannot be dismissed entirely, especially when considering specific types of calculated crime. Life without parole offers incapacitation, yes, but it does not offer the same level of societal condemnation or finality that some crimes warrant. It also imposes a lifelong burden on the state and potentially other inmates. Mr. Adebayo points to systemic biases, and these are serious concerns that demand constant vigilance and reform within the justice system. However, the solution is to address and rectify these biases, ensuring equal access to competent counsel, scrutinizing prosecutorial decisions, not to abolish a penalty deemed necessary for other reasons. Finally, while international trends are noteworthy, decisions about criminal justice are fundamentally matters of national sovereignty, reflecting a society's specific values and circumstances. We should not outsource our moral and legal judgments.
Ms. Rossi speaks of the state's duty, but I maintain that this duty does not extend to replicating the violence it seeks to punish. State-sanctioned killing legitimizes lethal force as a solution to social problems and perpetuates a cycle of violence, ultimately devaluing all human life. Life imprisonment without parole is an incredibly severe punishment, condemning an individual to die in prison. It achieves incapacitation without resorting to the morally fraught act of execution. Ms. Rossi argues for retribution, but true justice should strive for more than an eye for an eye. It should uphold human dignity, even for those who have committed terrible acts. Retribution risks descending into vengeance, which has no place in a mature justice system. While Ms. Rossi questions the deterrent studies, the overwhelming consensus among criminologists remains. the death penalty does not provide a greater deterrent effect than LWOP. We cannot justify taking lives based on common-sense speculation or disputed interpretations when the evidence points elsewhere. She emphasizes legal safeguards. Yet the Innocence Project and similar organizations have documented numerous cases of individuals sentenced to death who were later exonerated, sometimes after decades. The safeguards are imperfect, and when the consequence is death, any imperfection carries an unacceptable risk. Furthermore, the argument that the lengthy appeals process necessitated by these very safeguards provides justice for victims is often contradicted by victims' families themselves. Many find the decades of legal battles, uncertainty, and media attention deeply re-traumatizing, preferring the finality of an LWOP sentence.
Thank you both for those compelling rebuttals. Let's delve deeper into some specific aspects. Ms. Rossi, Mr. Adebayo mentioned the cost. Death penalty cases, with their extended trials and appeals, are consistently shown to be significantly more expensive than LWOP cases. Is this financial burden a relevant factor for taxpayers and the state?
While cost is a practical consideration, Dr. Reed, it should never be the primary determinant when discussing fundamental justice. If the death penalty is deemed the only appropriate punishment for certain crimes, the cost of ensuring its fair and meticulous application, including all safeguards, is a necessary societal investment. Reducing justice to a cost-benefit analysis risks trivializing the gravity of the crimes and the importance of proportionate punishment. Furthermore, some argue that the long-term costs of incarcerating someone for life can also be substantial.
With respect, Ms. Rossi, the exorbitant cost is not merely a practical issue, it's an ethical one. Those vast resources spent pursuing executions could be redirected towards crime prevention, victim support services, or improving the overall justice system, potentially yielding greater societal benefit. When LWOP provides equivalent public safety at a lower cost, choosing the vastly more expensive option that also carries the risk of executing the innocent seems fiscally and morally irresponsible.
Let's turn to the issue of systemic bias, which both of you acknowledged. Mr. Adebayo argues it's inherent. Ms. Rossi suggests it can be reformed. Can these deep-seated biases realistically be eradicated from capital punishment application, or are they an unavoidable feature?
Regrettably, I believe these biases are deeply ingrained and perhaps inextricable from a system that grants prosecutors and juries such ultimate discretion. Despite decades of attempted reforms, disparities persist. The intersection of race, poverty, quality of legal defense, and geographic location creates a complex web where equal justice in capital cases remains an elusive ideal. Abolition is the only certain way to prevent these biases from leading to irreversible consequences.
I don't underestimate the challenge, Dr. Reed, but I disagree that it's insurmountable. Continuous efforts towards better training, stricter guidelines for prosecutors, enhanced funding for public defenders, and rigorous judicial oversight can mitigate bias. To abandon a just penalty because its application requires constant refinement seems defeatist. The goal should be to perfect the system, ensuring fairness, rather than discarding a tool society may deem necessary.
Ms. Rossi, you emphasized absolute incapacitation. Is life without parole truly insufficient? Opponents argue it effectively removes dangerous individuals from society permanently.
LWOP is certainly a severe sanction and provides significant incapacitation. However, it does not eliminate the risk of violence within prison walls against guards or other inmates. Nor does it completely negate the possibility, however small, of future legislative changes, allowing parole, or even escape. Execution offers absolute, undeniable finality in incapacitation for those individuals whose actions demonstrate they pose an ultimate threat.
The risk of violence within prisons exists regardless of the death penalty, and is a matter for prison management and security, not a justification for state killing. Instances of escape from maximum security facilities housing LWOP inmates are extraordinarily rare in modern systems. LWOP provides permanent removal from society, fulfilling the need for public safety without the moral and practical issues associated with executions.
One final point in this section. Should the nature of the crime influence the debate? For instance, should the arguments differ when considering acts of large-scale terrorism or serial killing versus other types of murder?
I believe the principle of proportionality inherently requires considering the nature and scale of the crime. Crimes that demonstrate exceptional depravity or inflict mass casualties, like terrorism or calculated mass murder, arguably represent the strongest case for invoking the death penalty as the only commensurate response.
While the revulsion towards such crimes is understandable, the fundamental principles remain the same. The state should not kill, regardless of the crime's horror. Applying the death penalty selectively based on public outrage risks arbitrary justice and doesn't negate the core issues of potential error, bias, and lack of deterrence.
In closing, let us not forget the fundamental purpose of our justice system: to uphold the law, protect the innocent, and impose punishments that reflect the gravity of the crimes committed. The death penalty, reserved for the most egregious offenses, serves these ends. It is the ultimate expression of societal condemnation for acts that shatter lives and undermine our collective security. It embodies the principle of retribution, that the punishment must fit the crime. It provides absolute incapacitation, guaranteeing that the most dangerous offenders can never harm again. While we must relentlessly pursue fairness and minimize error through rigorous safeguards, these challenges do not invalidate the penalty itself. Retaining the death penalty affirms our commitment to justice for victims and sends an unequivocal message that innocent life is supremely valued. It is a difficult, solemn responsibility, but one that a just society must be prepared to undertake.
Tonight, I have argued that the death penalty is fundamentally incompatible with the values of a just and humane society. It is a cruel and unusual punishment that violates the inherent right to life. The ever-present, unacceptable risk of executing an innocent person, coupled with the documented systemic biases in its application, renders it profoundly unjust. There is no reliable evidence that it deters crime more effectively than life imprisonment without parole. The global trend towards abolition reflects a growing recognition that state killing serves no valid penological purpose that cannot be met by less drastic means. Life without parole ensures public safety and constitutes a severe punishment without resorting to state-sanctioned violence. Abolishing the death penalty is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to our society's commitment to upholding human dignity, even for those who have committed terrible wrongs. It is a step towards a more civilized and just future.
Ms. Rassi, Mr. Adebayo, thank you both for sharing your deeply considered perspectives and engaging in such a rigorous and respectful debate on this incredibly complex issue. Tonight's discussion has starkly highlighted the central tension: the demand for ultimate justice and societal protection, weighed against the fundamental value of human life and the irreversible consequences of potential error. We have explored the arguments surrounding morality, deterrence, retribution, systemic fairness, and the efficacy of alternatives like life without parole. The questions raised tonight do not have easy answers, and we hope this debate has provided our audience with valuable insights to inform their own reflections on the future of capital punishment.